So how do you find out that this is a match? That if they don't bring their own concerns out to you, because you're not just vetting the employee, they're vetting you. And a lot of retention issues comes from them realizing this is not the right job for them. And the single most effective hiring strategy I used is when I had somebody who I felt, this is somebody who I could hire, I'd be like, do you have another 2 hours? Because then you can just sit here with a team and just join them and ask them whatever you want. You can see how they work. You can see what their job is like. You can see who would be on your team. You get a full hands-on experience of the company. You will not walk out with any, ideas of that you maybe just deal with big brands or whatever. Like, this is a hands-on immersion in the company culture. And that just weeds out so many people who notice this is what they wanted. But it also goes the other way because, and this is maybe the little bit mischievous part, everything, the moment you walk into a door, is part of the job interview. So the moment they left, I went to the employees, who I have a good rapport with and said, what do you think about the person?
Yeah.
What did they ask about? What did they seem concerned with? What is your impression from them? And they're like, well, this guy only asked about the lunch break and the vacation. And I'm like, all right, we're done. So your employees are actually some of the best interviewers in the company, especially if you don't sit them at the interview table, but kind of sit them together with a candidate so they can actually get to know each other in a much less formal environment than an interview table. And the candidate can see hands-on what it's like, Maybe they wouldn't speak up so much in an interview because it would cause a lot of issues if you would do that in a Thai job interview. And I think that is one of the biggest ones.
I love too that you said that it's an interview that's not just about getting the best talent, it's about making sure that they actually would want to work for you, right?
Yes.
And so this reminds me a lot of something like dating, right? If you're on a first date with someone, you want to put your best foot forward, right? And so I think in a lot of job interviews, what an employer is trying to do is say how great they are, how great the benefits are, how great the job is, right? But then it can actually take sometimes days or weeks until you actually realize what the real job is or what the limitations of the job is or whatever, right? But it sounds like through the interview process that you laid out, you were showing the real job in a way that I think a lot of interviews wouldn't, right?
I think so, yes. And I think as a small company, you can do things that a large company can't do. You can have like an unstandardized hiring process, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing. The one thing, every single employee I hired throughout all the years in Thailand, all of them will remember one moment in the job interview, and that's the Elvis test.
Please explain.
So the Elvis test is, and I literally, it was one of those things like 7 p.m. I'm in the office. I'm like, I just have to kind of brainstorming. How do I test English skills? Because I can test spoken English skills. And there are like these standardized tests, but they don't really convey what I want. People who can write, like who have a voice, who kind of can communicate good in a written way. So I went to some website and pulled a short story. And this short story is basically about a disgruntled employee trying to kill his boss.
Okay.
I didn't even think about that part at the time, but at an Elvis lookalike contest, and the grand plan was to dress up as Elvis himself. And so it's like a 3-page short story. And I gave that to people and said, summarize this. And nobody has ever encountered anything like that. That is not a job interview test. You're just confronted with like a story about how he tried to kill his boss in an Elvis contest. I guess it also conveys a little bit what kind of environment are you working in here. Like this company might be a little weird. It was actually surprisingly great for evaluating English skills. And maybe that is a little bit less of an issue today, but I think still it's one of the main criteria in Thailand. Because you could really say, first of all, can they write a sentence? Second, do they just kind of copy random sentences together to make a summary? Because I guess summarization is not a super common taught subject. And then if they summarize, can they highlight the most important points of the story? And I mean, this doesn't make any sense if you're hiring, a coder or so, but for people who are communicating, and especially in written form on the internet, I felt this was massive. And to this day, I believe that was the best English language test we ever used.
It's great. I mean, because it just points out, like you said, how creative you can be as a smaller company, right? I guess it comes down to what advantages do you have? Big companies have their advantages, right? They have their referral networks and all these other things, but you have some advantages as a smaller company. You can be a lot more creative, it seems, right?
I think you can also just do less rules. I mean, when we first came here, we literally had like timestamps, for our employees, because that's what we kind of need from our corporate world. And then I'm like, well, this is kind of stupid. Let's just get rid of that. And then I think back in 2016, we just got rid of in-person office entirely. So about 4 years before everybody else, where I'm just like, you know what? You can work remotely. And in Bangkok, that's huge. Some of those people are commuting an hour and a half. And that is not something that anybody else would offer. And the people mess around on Facebook on their work time. Well, work time, probably. But this was an incredibly strong retention mechanism because nobody else could match this. And our employees constantly had to justify to their parents, why they're working for such a company that is not so well known. Because that's something I realized. You kind of have to evaluate employees in Thailand in a Thai cultural context. So what do I mean by that? For example, you would never ask about parents in a job interview in the US. You're probably not allowed to do so. But in Thailand, it tells you so much, like how they talk about their parents. In the US, you always ask about which university you went to. In Thailand, the universities aren't that competitive. The high schools are. So which high school they went to tells you a lot more about them than which university. I know a lot of foreigners like, I want to have somebody who speaks up into a meeting and will be like challenging me. Like, I want to have somebody who behaves like somebody who grew up in a Western culture. And if you actually hire somebody who grew up in a Western culture, I think that's a good standard. The problem is, if you're looking for those attributes in somebody who grew up in Thailand, they probably were like that always. And in Thailand, those attributes do not yield you a nice life.
Right.
They mean you are constantly at odds and fighting, and you, like, a lot of the people who kind of initially showed these Western attributes of confidence or being self-assertive, a lot of them turned out to be, assholes, like complete assholes.
Yeah.
So what I was looking for was a Western attribute of speaking out was actually just the Thai version of being a dick. And I feel like, so we're kind of actively hiring against our own interests by trying to kind of somehow replicate this Western cultural environment. Whereas when we understand how you kind of get Thai people to speak up in their own culture, that works way better.
Yeah. If you enjoyed this clip and want to watch more like it, click here. And if you want to watch the full video, click here.